When Emma returns home for Thanksgiving, expecting warmth and laughter, she instead finds an eerie silence broken only by the rhythmic creak of a rocking chair. Her husband Daniel is gone, vanished on a luxury cruise with his coworker Claire, and left behind is Arthur, his gruff but enigmatic stepfather. A crumpled note explains little. "You'll take care of Arthur. See you Monday." But as Emma soon discovers, this weekend will unravel secrets that change her life forever. What happened to their shared savings? Why does Arthur mutter cryptically about getting started? And why does Mrs. Donovan, the kindly neighbor, look at Emma with pity when she brings over a casserole? Let's find out. The crisp November air nipped at Emma's cheeks as she pulled her car into the driveway of her childhood home. She had been looking forward to this Thanksgiving weekend for weeks, a chance to reconnect with Daniel, enjoy cozy family moments, and escape the chaos of city life. But as she stepped out of the car, something felt off. There was no warm glow from the windows, no scent of roasted turkey wafting through the chilly breeze. Just silence. Emma hesitated before unlocking the door, her heart skipping a beat, when it creaked open to reveal an eerily empty house. The furniture sat untouched, covered in a thin layer of dust that suggested neglect rather than holiday preparation. Her stomach tightened as she called out, "Daniel? Anyone here?" No response came except for the rhythmic creak of a rocking chair in the living room. Turning the corner, Emma froze. There sat Arthur, Daniel's stepfather, his wiry frame swaying, slowly back and forth. His eyes were closed, but one cracked open lazily as he muttered, "Let's get started, shall we?" "Started with what?" Emma asked, confusion lacing her voice. She scanned the room again, searching for any sign of Daniel or Sylvia, her mother-in-law. Instead, her gaze landed on a crumpled note left carelessly on the kitchen counter. Picking it up, she read the scribbled words, "Gone cruising with an old friend. You'll take care of Arthur. See you Monday." Daniel. Her blood ran cold. Cruising? With an old friend? Who? And why hadn't Daniel told her about this? A knot formed in her throat as memories surfaced. How often Daniel mentioned Claire, his co-worker, lately. Too often, in fact. He always laughed it off when Emma teased him, saying they were just colleagues. Was this some kind of joke? As Emma tried to steady herself, her fingers brushed against a stack of papers on the counter. Something caught her eye, a bank statement peeking out from underneath. Against her better judgment, she unfolded it. The numbers made her dizzy. Massive withdrawals had drained nearly all their shared savings, money they'd saved for years, earmarked for their dream home. How could Daniel do this? Before Emma could process the betrayal, Arthur spoke again, his tone sharper now. "He didn't think I'd notice," he said, fixing her with a piercing stare. "But I did." What exactly had Arthur noticed? Emma stared at Arthur, her mind racing. His words lingered in the air like an unspoken accusation. "What do you mean, you noticed?" she asked, her voice trembling. She wanted to believe there was a reasonable explanation for everything, the missing money, Daniel's cryptic note, but deep down, doubt gnawed at her. Arthur leaned forward slightly, his bony hands gripping the arms of the rocking chair. For the first time, Emma noticed how frail he looked. His skin was pale, almost translucent, and dark circles shadowed his eyes. "You think this is about the money?" he rasped, shaking his head slowly. "It's bigger than that." He began to speak, his voice low but steady, recounting years of neglect at the hands of Daniel and Sylvia. It started small, forgotten prescriptions, skipped meals, even missed doctor appointments. But over time, it escalated. Arthur described evenings when Daniel would mock him openly, calling him a burden in front of friends. Once, during a heated argument, Daniel had shouted, "Why don't you just disappear already?" Emma listened, her chest tightening with every word. This wasn't the man she married, or thought she married. The Daniel she knew was charming, attentive, and kind. Or so she believed. Was it possible he hid this cruel side from her all these years? Determined to uncover the truth, Emma decided to talk to their neighbors. Surely someone must have seen or heard something. As she walked down the quiet street lined with autumn leaves, her heart pounded. What if no one knew anything? Worse, what if they did? At Mrs. Donovan's door, Emma hesitated before knocking. When the elderly woman answered, her warm smile faded into concern as soon as she saw Emma's face. "Is everything all right, dear?" she asked gently. Mrs. Donovan invited Emma inside and reluctantly shared stories of overhearing Daniel bragging about his upcoming trip while ignoring Arthur's pleas for help one evening. "I tried to step in," Mrs. Donovan admitted, wringing her hands nervously, "but your husband, he wouldn't listen." Before Emma could leave, Mrs. Donovan pressed a folded piece of paper into her palm. "This might help," she whispered, glancing around as though afraid someone might hear. What could be written on that paper? Emma clutched the folded paper Mrs. Donovan had given her, her fingers trembling as she unfolded it under the dim light of the hallway. Her breath caught. In her throat, it was a list of bank accounts, each linked to Daniel's name. The numbers were staggering: massive withdrawals, transfers to unfamiliar offshore accounts, and balances that left their shared savings nearly depleted. Her stomach churned as reality sank in. This wasn't just negligence, it was calculated. Betrayal. Emma felt anger bubbling inside her, but she forced herself to stay calm. She needed proof, solid, undeniable evidence, if she was going to confront Daniel when he returned. And Arthur, sitting quietly in his chair back at the house, seemed to know more than he'd let on. Back home, Emma sat across from Arthur, laying out the documents on the coffee table between them. "Did you know about this?" she asked softly, watching his face for any flicker of emotion. To her surprise, Arthur didn't seem shocked. Instead, he nodded slowly, his expression grim. "Daniel thought I wouldn't understand," Arthur muttered, his voice tinged with bitterness. "But I've seen enough to know when someone's hiding something. He stopped caring long ago, not just about me, but about anyone who doesn't serve his interests." Emma's heart ached hearing this. How could the man she loved turn out? To be so callous? Determined to expose the truth, she and Arthur devised a plan. They began gathering evidence meticulously: secret bank statements, unpaid medical bills, prescription refills ignored, and even emails hinting at Daniel's growing closeness with Claire. Each discovery felt like another piece of her heart breaking, yet it also fueled her resolve. To strengthen their case, they staged photos showing Arthur's declining health. With his permission, Emma captured images of him looking frail and unwell, knowing these visuals would later serve as undeniable proof of neglect. It was heartbreaking work, but Arthur insisted. "If people won't listen to words," he said firmly, "maybe they'll believe pictures." Late one night, as Emma sifted through piles of paperwork at the dining table, Arthur suddenly gasped, clutching his chest. She rushed to his side, panic rising in her chest. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice shaking. It wasn't a heart attack. It was pain radiating from untreated cancer. Arthur confessed he'd been diagnosed months ago, but kept it hidden, unwilling to burden anyone further. "I don't have much time left," he admitted quietly, tears welling in his eyes. "That's why we need to act fast." As Emma processed this revelation, Arthur grabbed her hand, his grip surprisingly strong despite his frailty. "There's one last thing I need to do before it's too late," he said gravely. "We need to record my testimony." What truths would Arthur reveal in his final message? The room fell silent as Emma set up the camera on a tripod, her hands trembling slightly. Arthur sat in his chair, his face pale but resolute. Despite his frailty, there was a quiet strength in his eyes, a determination to leave behind something meaningful before it was too late. "Are you sure about this?" Emma asked softly, kneeling beside him. She didn't want to push him if he wasn't ready. But Arthur nodded firmly, his jaw set. "It's not just for me," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's for everyone who's ever been treated like they don't matter." Emma pressed record, stepping back as the small red light blinked to life. Arthur took a deep breath, then began speaking. His words were slow and deliberate, each sentence heavy with emotion. He didn't rant or lash out in anger. Instead, he spoke with profound sadness, his voice tinged with regret. "The real pain isn't death," he said, tears glistening in his tired eyes. "It's realizing you were only ever a burden, to your family, to those you trusted most. I spent years trying to convince myself that Daniel and Sylvia cared, even when their actions said otherwise. But now I see the truth. And maybe through this, others will see it too." He went on to detail years of neglect, missed medications, ignored pleas for help, public humiliations masked as jokes. Yet beneath the sorrow, there was also hope. Arthur expressed gratitude for Emma's presence, calling her an unexpected ally in his final days. "You've shown me kindness when no one else did," he said, looking directly at the camera. "That means more than you'll ever know." As he wrapped up, Arthur finalized a new will, leaving everything to Emma and naming elder abuse charities as beneficiaries. It was a gesture of trust and perhaps redemption for both of them. Just as Emma turned off the camera, the sound of car tires crunching against gravel broke the silence outside. Someone was here. Sylvia, Daniel's mother, burst through the door moments later, her face flushed with irritation. "What are you two doing?" she demanded, her sharp gaze landing on the camera and scattered papers. "Exploiting a dying man for attention? This is low even for you, Emma." As Sylvia advanced toward the table, Emma quickly hid the USB drive containing Arthur's testimony in her pocket. Sylvia's eyes narrowed suspiciously. "Where's the footage?" she snapped. Would Emma be able to protect Arthur's final message, or would Sylvia uncover the truth? Sylvia's sharp voice cut through the room like a knife, her presence filling the space with an unsettling energy. She stood tall, arms crossed, glaring at Emma with barely concealed hostility. "I asked you a question," she snapped, stepping closer. "Where's the footage? What are you hiding?" Emma clenched her fists, forcing herself to stay calm despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. She couldn't let Sylvia intimidate her. Not now. Not when so much was at stake. "It's none of your business," Emma replied firmly, her voice steady despite the storm brewing inside her. "This is about Arthur, not us." Arthur, who had remained silent until now, stirred in his chair. His frail frame seemed even smaller compared to Sylvia's imposing demeanor, but there was fire in his eyes. "Leave her alone, Sylvia," he rasped, his tone carrying an unexpected authority. "If anyone's exploiting anyone, it's you. And Daniel. You've done enough damage already." Sylvia turned to him, her expression softening briefly before hardening again. "Don't be ridiculous, Arthur," she said dismissively. "You're sick, confused. Let me handle this." She reached for the camera on the tripod, but Emma intercepted her, grabbing it protectively. "You're not taking that," Emma said, her voice rising. "Whatever you think you're protecting, whatever lies you're trying to cover up, it ends here." For a moment, the room was silent except for the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. Sylvia's lips curled into a sneer. "You have no idea what you're dealing with," she spat. "Do you really think Daniel would just leave everything behind for someone like you? He's moved on, Emma. Face it." The words hit Emma like a punch to the gut, but she refused to let them break her. Instead, she straightened her posture, meeting Sylvia's gaze head-on. "Maybe he has," she said quietly, surprising even herself with her composure. "But I'm not fighting for him anymore. I'm fighting for Arthur, for justice." Just as Sylvia opened her mouth to retort, a soft knock echoed from the front door. All three of them froze, startled by the interruption. It was Mrs. Donovan, holding a steaming casserole dish. Her kind smile faltered when she saw the tension in the room. "Am I interrupting something?" she asked hesitantly, glancing between them. Before anyone could respond, Mrs. Donovan stepped inside, setting the dish down on the counter. Her eyes darted toward the scattered papers and the camera, then back to Sylvia. "Is everything all right here?" she asked gently, but there was a knowing look in her eyes. Did she suspect more than she let on? Mrs. Donovan lingered by the counter, her presence soft yet unignorable. She glanced around the tense room, taking in the scattered papers, the camera still clutched protectively by Emma, and Sylvia's rigid stance. "I just wanted to bring over a little something for Arthur," she said, gesturing to the casserole. "Dish." Her voice was warm, but her eyes betrayed a quiet curiosity. "It smells like things are complicated here." Emma hesitated, unsure how much to say or whether Mrs. Donovan could truly be trusted. But then she remembered the woman's earlier kindness, the way she'd shared stories about Daniel's neglect without hesitation. Perhaps Mrs. Donovan wasn't just a nosy neighbor. Perhaps she could be an ally. "It's okay." Arthur spoke up suddenly, his voice weak but steady. He turned his gaze toward Mrs. Donovan, who softened immediately at the sight of him. "You've always been kind to me, even when others weren't. I think it's time you knew the truth." Sylvia bristled, stepping forward as if to protest. But Arthur raised a shaky hand to silence her. For once, she obeyed, though her face flushed with anger. Emma took this as her cue to explain. Slowly, carefully, she began to recount everything: the missing money, Daniel's betrayal, the evidence they'd gathered, and Arthur's terminal diagnosis. Mrs. Donovan listened intently, her expression shifting from concern to disbelief to outright shock. When Emma finished, tears welled in the older woman's eyes. "Oh, Arthur," she murmured, shaking her head. "I had no idea it was this bad." Turning to Sylvia, she added firmly, "And you? How could you let this happen?" Sylvia sputtered, clearly caught off guard. "This isn't your concern," she snapped, but her voice lacked conviction. Mrs. Donovan ignored her, focusing instead on Emma. "What can I do to help?" she asked earnestly. With Mrs. Donovan's support, Emma felt a renewed sense of purpose. Together, they finalized their plan. The video testimony would remain hidden until the right moment, ensuring its safety. Meanwhile, Mrs. Donovan agreed to gather additional testimonies from other neighbors who had witnessed Daniel's neglect firsthand. As Mrs. Donovan prepared to leave, she paused at the door, turning back with a thoughtful expression. "There's one more thing," she said, quietly. "I overheard Daniel talking to someone on the phone last week, someone named Claire. They were laughing about how easy it was to fool everyone." Emma's heart sank. So Claire wasn't just a co-worker, she was actively involved in Daniel's schemes. The betrayal cut deeper than ever before. Before Emma could process this revelation, the distant rumble of a car engine broke the evening silence. Headlights swept across the windows. Someone else was arriving, and judging by the timing, it could only be one person. Had Daniel returned? The car engine cut off outside, followed by the slam of a door. Footsteps crunched against the gravel driveway, growing louder with each passing second. Emma's heart raced as she glanced at Arthur, who sat silently in his chair, his face pale but resolute. Mrs. Donovan had already slipped out the back door, promising to return later if needed. Sylvia stood frozen near the counter, her lips pressed into a thin line. Then the front door swung open, and there he was, Daniel, sunburned, laughing and holding hands with Claire. They looked every bit the picture of carefree bliss, oblivious to the storm brewing inside the house. "Surprise," Daniel called out, his tone light and teasing. "We're back early." Emma didn't respond. She simply stared at him, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. His smile faltered slightly when he noticed the somber atmosphere. "What's going on?" he asked, glancing between Emma, Arthur, and Sylvia. No one spoke. Instead, Emma stepped forward, holding up the damning evidence they'd gathered, the bank statements, photos of Arthur's declining health, and neighbor testimonies. "This is what's going on," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "Care to explain?" Daniel's smug grin vanished instantly. He released Claire's hand and took a step closer, his eyes darting nervously between the documents and Emma's. Unwavering gaze. "Where did you get all this?" he demanded, his tone sharp now. "You don't get to ask questions," Emma shot back. "Not anymore." She gestured toward Arthur, whose frail form seemed to shrink further under Daniel's dismissive glance. "Do you even know what you've done? Do you realize how much pain you've caused?" For a moment, Daniel looked genuinely confused, but only for a moment. Then his expression hardened and he turned to Sylvia. "Mom, tell them this is ridiculous," he said, his voice rising. "They're blowing everything out of proportion." But Sylvia remained silent, guilt etched across her face. Even Claire shifted uncomfortably, sensing the gravity of the situation. Just as Daniel opened his mouth to protest further, Emma pulled out the USB drive containing Arthur's video testimony. "You should watch this," she said quietly, inserting it into the laptop on the table. The screen flickered to life, showing Arthur seated in his chair, speaking directly to the camera. His words were calm but devastating, detailing years of neglect and emotional abuse at Daniel's hands. As the video played, Daniel's bravado crumbled, replaced by shock, and then shame. When the video ended, Daniel sank into a chair, his head in his hands. For the first time, Emma saw vulnerability in him. But before she could speak, Arthur stirred weakly in his chair. His breathing grew labored, and Emma rushed to his side. Was this the end? Emma knelt beside Arthur, her hand gently clasping his frail one as his breathing grew shallow. Tears streamed down her face, but she didn't try to stop them. "You did it, Arthur," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You stood up for yourself, and for so many others who couldn't." Arthur managed a faint smile, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Thank you, Emma," he murmured, his voice barely audible, "for seeing me when no one else did." His grip on her hand loosened, and then with a quiet sigh, he was gone. The room fell silent, except for the sound of Emma's soft sobs. Daniel sat slumped in the corner, his face buried in his hands. Claire had retreated to the doorway, visibly uneasy, while Sylvia hovered near the counter, wringing her hands nervously. None of them spoke. The weight of Arthur's testimony and his peaceful passing hung heavy in the air. Emma rose slowly, wiping her tears. She felt an unexpected calm wash over her, a sense of clarity. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about honoring Arthur's legacy and ensuring his final wish for justice would not go unheard. She turned to Daniel, holding out the letter Arthur had written before he passed. "This is for you," she said flatly, placing it in his lap. Inside were instructions for distributing Arthur's remaining assets, a modest inheritance left entirely to Emma, along with generous donations to elder abuse charities. There was also a heartfelt message urging Daniel to reflect on his actions, not out of anger, but out of hope that he might change. Daniel read the letter in silence, his hands trembling. When he looked up, his eyes were red-rimmed. "I didn't mean," he began, his voice cracking, but Emma cut him off. "It doesn't matter what you meant," she said firmly. "What matters is what you did, and now you'll have to live with the consequences." With that, Emma walked away, leaving behind her wedding ring on the table. She stepped outside into the crisp November sunlight, feeling lighter than she had in years. The cold air stung her cheeks, but it also felt cleansing, a fresh start. As she drove away from the house, she glanced at the USB drive resting on the passenger seat. Arthur's video testimony would find its way to the right people: lawyers, authorities, anyone who could ensure such neglect never happened again. Justice would be served, not just for Arthur, but for countless others like him. Emma allowed herself a small smile through her tears. In losing so much, she had found something invaluable: strength, purpose, and the courage to walk away from a life built on lies. Arthur had shown her that even in pain, there could be dignity, and in loss, there could be hope. As Emma merged onto the highway, her phone buzzed with a text notification. It was from Mrs. Donovan. "Proud of you, dear. Let me know if you need anything." Emma saved the number, knowing she'd already gained more than she lost: a new ally, a renewed spirit, and a future shaped by honor. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more powerful tales of resilience, justice, and redemption. Share your thoughts in the comments below. How would you have handled Emma's situation?